come and filter in and grab a seat. We're so happy to have you this evening and welcome. We're here to talk about the county's future land use plan. So if you're in the wrong place, I hope you're not. We're so happy to have this big of a crowd and join us. But before we get started, I do want to ask that if you have any questions as the speakers are presenting, to write those questions on the note cards that were placed on each of the chairs. Write your question, your name, and your email address or phone number, and what we'll do is if you'll pass it to the end of the aisles, our staff will be by to grab them, and we will answer as many questions as we're able to tonight. If we don't get to your question, we will follow up with you afterwards, which is why we're asking for your contact information so that we can make sure that we get an answer to your question. So now I'd like to invite Dr. Paul Stump up to welcome us to the university. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Thunderous applause, please. It is my privilege to welcome all of you to Alumni Hall tonight. I want to ask by show of hands, for how many of you is this your first visit to Cumberland University? Wow, that is great. We are delighted to have all of you here. I have a lot of friends that are out here tonight, but some of you I have not met in the past, and I want to welcome you. I want to invite you to come back to our campus. We have a lot going on. We're in the business of educating people, and I want to just share with you a couple of quick thoughts. I think I'm on the agenda for 2 minutes, so I'll be succinct. But I want to give you 3 numbers. Those numbers are 60, 38, and 64. Those are not lottery winning numbers, I don't think. But 60, 38, and 64 represent 3 very important numbers to us at Cumberland University this fall. Anybody have an idea what those represent? Well, I wouldn't expect you to, but 60 is the number of counties across the great state of Tennessee from which we have students on our campus this fall. We have students from 60 of the 95 counties across the great state of Tennessee. 38 out of 50 states is the number of states from which we have students on our campus this fall. And a new record for us this fall, we have students on our campus from 64 countries. 64 countries represented here on our, that's almost a third of the total countries in the world. And we're very proud of that. And we're delighted to have and bring the diversity, which we do, to our great county. I want to share one other thought with you, and that is something that I saw this great quote the other day from Helen Keller. Helen Keller said, purportedly, she said, I got to remember this, I don't want to say it wrong, I wrote it down. She said, a well-educated mind will always have more questions than answers. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. And I think we are fortunate to be able to have a forum like this on our campus where we can not just talk about the answers that we might all have in our minds, but get an opportunity to ask questions and question even our own thoughts about what is the highest and best use for this precious commodity that we have right here, 365,000 and some odd acres of property in our great county. We all need to think about that. We all need to think about what's the highest and best use. We need to question that, and we need to understand more, all of us do, before we can really fully answer that question. So it's my privilege now to introduce to you the mayor of our great county. He is, by the way, my favorite county mayor for a lot of reasons. One, he's a great mayor, but two, in addition to his many other talents, y'all know he's a coach, he does a lot of things well, but he also is an adjunct professor, faculty member here at Cumberland University. He teaches our students right here in this building in a classroom right back here a couple of days a week. And we are grateful for our wonderful mayor, Randall Hutto. Please join me in welcoming my friend, Mayor Randall Hutto.
Thank you. It is an honor for me to be a part of the meeting tonight, and thank you all for coming out and taking a part of this portion of the planning process as we go through developing our land use plan. Your involvement is important to us, and what you have to say is important. I just want you to know, though, that as we talk about the land use plan, and the last time it was done was 2006, and so it was time to update that plan, and so that's where this began as we started this process. I want to tell you the process started some time back, though. It started back in the spring of 22. And they had some meetings, a round of meetings at that time. It was March the 22nd of 22. They went over to the Gladeville Middle School and had 74 people there. March the 29th, they went to Watertown Elementary and had 19 people that came to that one. April the 5th on 2022, they had West Elementary, they had 22 people. And then on April the 12th, they went to Carroll Oakland and had 116 people. And so they reached out at that time and began to talk about what do you want in your area. And with the land use plan, and it is a map, a list of tools, a vision about what you want. But again, as anything knows, the legislative body normally has the last say-so. So it may say on there that it is a land use for this particular area, C4, R1, A1. And then you have a zoning map that has all those same type of descriptions on it as well. But if they want to change that, then they'll go to the committee, the BOZA committee or whatever, to ask for that variance and then end up eventually at the county commission for final approval. So we have that happen throughout the process. But what we have tonight is where you get a chance to draw and develop that map. So in the spring of 22, we started this, and then, as you well know, we have the census every 10 years. And so when the census gets done, then the cities find out what their population is. So they decide at that time if they want to change what is known as the urban growth boundary, which means that's about a mile outside the city limits, an area that's not in the city limits, but they move that line so that if somebody develops something there, their planning commission would have a say-so in what goes there in case one day it's annexed into the cities. As you know, that law has changed as well. They can't annex you now without your permission. Of course, you have to request to be annexed into the city, and then they have a right to take you in or not. But anyway, that urban growth boundary map is important. So we didn't want people to get confused with the land use plan map and the urban growth boundary, so we paused that. GNRC did until we got the urban growth boundary map done, and then we picked this back up. So really there are three phases here. The first phase, of course, focuses on going around and listening to what you say and what you want. And through that was developed 7 themes and some key takeaways that they'll share with you tonight about what those were. The second phase is we talk about trending, what do we want? And many of you will say, we don't want anything. We don't want, we've had enough and we're ready for people to stay away. But there are times, as you well know, that I can't, as the county mayor or the county commission, tell Johnny he can't sell his farm. He has a right to do that by law. And I want to kind of cover this too with you because this happens many times. People come to me and say, well, a lot of times they show up at the planning commission and they have a lot of people there and the planning commission votes against it. And then sometimes they have a lot there and the planning commission won't vote against it. What's the difference, Mayor? Well, the difference is this. For example, in Wilson County today, if it's zoned A1 in the agriculture area and Johnny's got a farm of 500 acres out there, then he has a right by law to put 1 house for every 2 acres. Now, he may come and say, I want to put 4 houses for every 2 acres, and the Planning Commission or the Board of Zoning Appeals can make a decision on that and say, no, you can't. But we can't stop the 1 house for every 2 acres. That's his right by law. So 250 homes can go on that farm. So we know that when people come and they want to sell their farm, that's going to happen. So then the land use map itself kind of says, okay, well, what can go in there right by law? And that's what you're here tonight to help us decide and to help us focus on. As we talk about that part or the process that we have there, GNRC, of course, started back up on January the 19th of 2024. And they made some presentations of what they heard on that first round of talking to people, to the Planning Commission, and also to the Board of County Commissioners. So they made that first round there with those people. Then they went out and made some same presentations about what they heard, the Rotary clubs, Kiwanis clubs, different civics clubs, and made the presentation there as well. They also put together a group of what they called a steering committee. And that's a group of people that are leaders here, and let them have some input of what they want to see coming in to our county. And they ran those 7 themes by them as well. And there's also another committee that met that's a part of this. It's called an intergovernmental coordinated task force, which is a lot of the different people in planning and zoning that's located within the governments. So the process has been pretty long already, and will continue to be long, and that there'll be another round of meetings at the schools in order to make sure that we present back to that group of people or the public there what we've heard. Tonight's focus, and I don't want to steal the thunder there, but tonight's focus is to bring some people to the front and hear them talk about what their needs are maybe from their perspective. And then also tonight we're going to have somebody that come that will tell you a little bit of an experience that they've had in another county through some of the same process. So that's what tonight is really about. And let me see if I can do it justice here on bringing that man to the stage. Our keynote speaker that will start it off tonight is Mike Madison. He is from Williamson County Development Director. Mike oversees the various departments involved in that development and permitting process. Prior to that, Mike served as a Williamson County Planning Director for 18 years. During his tenure there, the county developed and adopted 2 separate updates to the Comprehensive Land Use Plan, new zoning ordinances, multiple special area plans, and for strategic areas of the county, Mike helped them coordinate and make that happen. Mike is also serves as a member of the Tennessee Local Government Planning Advisory Committee, where he finishes his term as chair. Mike has 30-plus years of progressively responsible experience in planning profession and has previously worked for the city of Rock Hill, South Carolina, where he served as senior planner, and also the city of Asheville, North Carolina, where he held various positions there, including city development director. Mike will give us an overview tonight, a little bit about his experiences here of what he's had in this process. And I want to also thank not only you for being here tonight, but also the Greater Nashville Regional Council, which that is a group of people that work for, there's 13 counties and 52 cities that make up that organization, but they become kind of the brain power for us if we need information, and they'll do things, as we talk about here, of developing the land use plan. So they have been the guiding post. They have no really outside of organizing the data and the information. Ms. Jessica Hill has been the lead on this project for Plan Wilson, but a lot of their other members are here as well. So we appreciate your input. We hope tonight's meeting will help you understand a little bit about what's been going on in the region around us. And then I will turn this over now to Mr. Mike. Thank you, Mike. Let's welcome Mike to the stage, please.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Hutto, and good evening, everybody. I'm Mike Madison. I'm with Williamson County, and I'm excited to be here this evening to kind of learn from you all in terms of what you're facing and what you're going to be experiencing over the next couple of years. We, in Williamson County, did an update to our comprehensive land use plan about 4 years ago, and so that's pretty fresh in our memories. And so I was asked to come and talk to you this evening about our experience in Williamson County of doing what you all are in the process of doing here in Wilson County. So let me start by saying that I don't, from Williamson County, even presume to understand what your issues are, or let alone how you should go about addressing those. But I do hope that me talking about our experience will at least resonate with you, and that you'll be able to pull at least a couple of nuggets out that you can use here. All right, let's see if I can make this work. Keep this way? Other way? Okay, thank you very much. Okay, that takes care of this slide. We're already rolling. So I always like to start talks like this by talking about community character, because to me, the main thing about planning is to look to the future and envision and identify a desired future character, and then develop policies and goals and strategies to help implement or achieve that desired character. We feel like we're very privileged in Williamson County to have what we think is exceptional community character. A lot of that is our rural character that people value very highly in Williamson County. We feel like we've got a great combination of high quality urban areas and also very, very high quality rural areas, and that juxtaposition between those two are really important to us. Our rural character in Williamson County is, we think of it as like a little economic engine, because that has led to a lot of rural and agricultural tourism opportunities. We have a winery, we have an area called Leapers Fork that is very rural and attracts tourists. So we feel very, very fortunate in Williamson County to have the character that we have. That's what that should have been on. And I'll tell you what, you all should be just as proud of your character here in Wilson County. It's just as remarkable here as it is in Williamson County. We love how in Franklin we can be in downtown, beautiful downtown Franklin, and then in 5 to 10 minutes in the car be in beautiful rural areas. And that's a unusual thing if you look around the country. And you all have that same thing here. And so it's important that we all recognize the character, and that we work really hard to preserve and augment that character, and think about what we want to see in the future from a character standpoint. So going back a little bit, the mayor mentioned that your previous comprehensive plan was done in 2006. Ours had been done in 2007. And at that point, we went through a very lengthy process. We had a great deal of public participation. We had numerous meetings, great feedback, and one of the predominant themes that people kept talking about is the need to preserve rural character and to focus the growth in certain key areas where the infrastructure was there, made available to support that growth, mainly being in the urban growth boundaries. So that comprehensive plan addressed a number of different things, land use, of course, infrastructure, natural resources, facilities, and so forth. But again, that predominant theme that we kept hearing was to preserve rural character and to focus the growth strategically. There were a lot of ideas floated around in terms of how to do that. That's part of how we got some of the zoning that allowed our farm wineries and some other rural uses of land that didn't involve selling for subdivisions. But importantly, a decision was made by ultimately the county commission back then not to change the allowable residential densities, which have historically been 1 unit per acre in Williamson County. And I'll talk a little bit about how that played out in Williamson. So real quickly, to give you the lay of the land, we have 6 different cities in Williamson County. I won't go through those. You probably know them. The cities are shown in various colors on this map, and then surrounding the cities in that lighter shade of the same color are the urban growth boundaries. So the way it should work is that the majority of the growth should take place in those colored areas, either in the cities or in those urban growth boundaries as they're annexed into the cities and as infrastructure is made available. However, that isn't how it played out. And so when we were updating our comprehensive plan a few years ago, we were noticing some trends that were concerning to us. And this map depicts some of those trends that were taking place. To orient you again, the dark gray color are those 6 municipalities. The yellow background represents the urban growth boundaries. The red on the map represents development that was already in place in 2007 when that previous comprehensive plan was adopted. And then those blue and purple shades represent development that took place after 2007. And so if the system was working like we hoped it would, you would have seen the majority of those blue and purple shaded areas settle in the cities or in the urban growth boundaries. But instead, a lot of what we saw was sort of a leapfrogging of the urban growth boundaries settling into rural areas. And there were a lot of reasons for that. You know, the land is a little cheaper in the outlying areas. The zoning at the time allowed 1 unit per acre. We've been experiencing a proliferation of these non-traditional wastewater treatment and disposal systems that make development in rural areas easier. Some of the challenges of annexation that the cities have contributed to that. And partially it was because the urban growth boundaries in yellow were done in 2001 and in some cases no longer represented where the cities could actually provide sewer and other infrastructure and grow. So all those things contributed to that development pattern, and that was kind of a concerning trend to us as we were embarking on our comprehensive plan update. And it was particularly concerning in light of some of the population projections that were out there at the time that suggested that Williamson County would essentially double in growth between now and 2040. And so that kind of highlighted and underscored the need to really be deliberate about how we plan for the future in order to accommodate that kind of growth pressure while still preserving what makes our county special in the first place. And of course, this is something that you all are seeing here in Wilson County. Your population projections show a great deal of growth too. They're projecting that your unincorporated area may double in population between now and 2045. So this was eye-opening for us. And we felt like that we were really in a fork in the road moment from a policy standpoint where we needed to kind of decide as a county once and for all whether we wanted to, still pursue the notion of preserving rural character and focusing that growth in and around the urban growth boundaries as the 2007 plan suggested, or if we were willing to concede and conclude that a continuation of that suburban sprawl into the rural areas was appropriate. And so again, we were in that moment where we felt like we needed to decide that once and for all. So during our planning process, we asked our consultant team to develop some different growth scenarios and do some modeling of development potential. And we asked them to do two different versions. One that we called business as usual. In other words, what would happen if the county fully developed out under the policies that were in place at the time, that 1 unit per acre, versus a scenario called town and country where the allowable density in the rural areas was reduced to 1 unit per 5 acres instead of 1 unit per acre, and the development was encouraged to take place in and around the cities. So we asked them to come up with those two models, and then we evaluated those based on three criteria that we felt like were very important to the community. First is community character. How well did each of those scenarios align with the vision that the citizens said they want to see in the county? Secondly was the impact of those scenarios on our roadways and traffic infrastructure. And then finally, we hired a fiscal consultant to evaluate those two scenarios based on fiscal aspects, what each of those scenarios would ultimately cost the county in terms of providing services over a 20-year period. So these next slides kind of illustrate those two different development models. This is the business as usual. You can see the numbers there, 82,000 additional dwelling units outside of the urban growth boundaries. 2.8 acres would be the average lot size under that scenario. That scenario would generate 6 vehicle trips per acre. And then one thing that was highlighted very significantly was that this scenario was projected to cost about $5 billion over that period in terms of the county providing services such as schools and everything else. Versus the town and country model, and you can see these numbers, they're essentially cut in half. 48,000 additional dwelling units down to 3.8 trips per acre, about $100 million shaved off of the transportation and roadway needs. And then the biggest one that resonated with our people was this model was shown to have about a $3.5 billion cost savings over that 20-year period in terms of what it would cost the county to provide those services. So that was really eye-opening in our process. So once we developed those models, we went out to the public and got feedback, you know, in meetings like this. And what we found was that about 92% of the population supported that town and country model, and that was pretty significant. I will say that the 8% that did not support it were very vocal, and they talked quite a bit about their perception that the town and country model would diminish property values. It was not an easy decision to make. You know, I understood completely in 2007 why the choice was made at that time not to change those densities. But I think that over time and the development that we saw and what we were able to show in terms of fiscal impacts made a difference this time. We were working with an advisory committee that unanimously decided to pursue the town and country model, and then both the county commission and the planning commission were pretty close to unanimous in their consensus. So we feel like we did answer that fork in the road question and did want to definitely continue to preserve rural character. I will point out that we don't see our plan as a no growth plan, maybe not even as a slow growth plan. We see it as a plan that distributes that growth in a way that makes sense for the future of our particular county. Obviously, you know, in a comprehensive plan, there are dozens of recommendations, but if you were to kind of boil it down into 2 key ideas, the first one, as I said, was the notion of reducing the allowable density in rural areas, and the plan recommended that all those areas you see in green be zoned 1 unit per 5 acres instead of the previous version where much of that, not all of that, but much of that had been zoned 1 unit per acre. So that was a key recommendation that was put in the plan, and then about a year later, the county commission rezoned that property to reflect that 1 unit per 5 acre density. I will say, and other people may have different viewpoints on this, but I will say that the concerns about property values have not really played out. Property values have continued to rise and be very, very healthy in these areas. The second main idea of the plan was for the county and all 6 of the cities to work together to collaboratively plan where growth should occur and take another fresh look at those urban growth boundaries that hadn't been changed since 2001, and that was one of the obstacles for making our overall land use scheme work. And so we did that. We spent a lot of time working with the 6 different municipalities, and that resulted in an amendment to our growth plan, which I'll just mention very briefly as I close. So again, that growth plan is different from the comprehensive plan. The growth plan is that plan that establishes those urban growth boundaries surrounding the municipalities. It also establishes planned growth areas out in the rural areas, and then finally the areas that should stay rural. So this is the growth plan that was approved in 2001. that it doesn't need a whole lot of explanation. I will point out that the orange areas were the planned growth areas. Those were unincorporated Williamson County areas that were designated as planned growth areas, pretty large in size. And you can see with the revised growth plan that those areas have shrunk very significantly in order to coincide with the recommendations of our comprehensive land use plan. The other changes won't mean as much to you all here, but various municipalities, some of them shrunk their area, some of them expanded, but the main point is that those areas now align with where the cities know that they can provide infrastructure. And so this is a process that should lead to more certainty in the development process and when annexations occur and that sort of thing. We wanted to go beyond just drawing lines on a map for our growth plan, and so in conjunction with that, our folks also established a set of goals and strategies for how to implement that new growth plan, and I'll highlight some of those here that have been memorialized in formal agreements between all those jurisdictions. One is that the cities have agreed that they won't annex outside of those growth boundaries. We went through all this trouble to establish those, and those should be viewed as pretty sacrosanct. Also, that there's a commitment on everybody's part to revisit our growth plan at least every 5 years instead of letting it stay on the shelf like we did before and like a lot of areas do. We're going to be developing interim development policies that talk about how land should be developed in those urban growth boundaries between now and when they are annexed into the city. What is the county's responsibility for those areas? We're establishing an advisory group that's going to meet quarterly to talk about important issues that face both the county and the city. And then finally, our mayor was real strong on establishing a multi-jurisdictional entity to deal with traffic and transportation-related issues. So that's a quick overview of how we have approached things in Williamson County. Again, I'm excited to kind of watch and learn and see how you all are approaching it here in Wilson County. And and I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Liz. Okay, all right. I'm Melanie Minter, President and CEO of the Lebanon-Wilson County Chamber of Commerce, and I want to thank GNRC for asking me to be the moderator for this evening. At this time, I would like to thank Mike Madison for his presentation. Please give Mr. Madison a round of applause for sharing his knowledge and expertise with us tonight. We will begin a panel discussion next, and GNRC passed out note cards for questions. Please also include, which we didn't say the first time, who to direct your question to, and an email contact in case we don't have time to answer every question. You can pass your questions to GNRC staff now. I will read a few questions for the panelists tonight, and speaker time permitting, GNRC will contact you with a response if you do not hear your question read aloud. Please join me for an expanded discussion on some key themes and perspectives of Wilson County's future. Let's get started. At this time, I would like to introduce our panelists for the evening. Our first panelist to my left is Liz McLaurin, President and CEO of the Land Trust for Tennessee. Liz has held various positions at the Land Use Trust for Tennessee and has been President and CEO since 2016. She serves on the Land Trust Alliance National Leadership Council, the Williamson County Stormwater Appeals Board, and the Advisory Board of Franklin's Charge. Liz also served on the Williamson County Land Use Plan Update Advisory Committee. Liz and her family live in the Leapers Fork community in Williamson County. Thank you, Liz. Also joining us to my left is Dr. John Grant, founder of Compassionate Hands. John is the founder of Compassionate Hands, a network of Wilson County churches offering winter shelter and year-round services to neighbors needing housing since 2013. Over the last 3 years, Compassionate Hands has provided case management to help shelter guests to find jobs, benefits, and housing. John's previous experience includes 30 years of ministry, most recently with College Hills Church of Christ in Lebanon. He and Amy have lived in Wilson County since 2005. They have 3 daughters, 2 son-in-laws, and 2 granddaughters. Thank you, John. Lastly, we have to my right, Brooksy Carlton. She is the Assistant Commissioner of Community and Rural Development, Tennessee Department of Economic and Community Development. Brooksy serves as the Assistant Commissioner of Community and Rural Development for the Tennessee Department of Economic and Community Development. In this position, Brooksy oversees federal grant funding from the Delta Regional Authority, the Appalachian Regional Commission, and the Community Development Block Grant Program. She works with the Broadband Accessibility, Tennessee Main Street, 3-Star, and Select Tennessee programs. She has been involved in the administration of more than 4,500 grants totaling more than $1.6 billion. Thank you, Brooksy, for being here. And then also to my right, you have met Mike. So, all right. We are attracting new residents every day. 5 people choose to live in Wilson County because of its proximity. People choose to live, obviously, to Nashville and their families and friends, as well as the rural character and high quality of life. My first couple of questions are lightning rounds for everyone to answer. You will have 2 minutes each for the lightning rounds, and individual questions will be 5 minutes each. So this is a question for all of you, with the exception of Mike. We're going to start with Liz. So Liz, if you want to go first. What resonated with Williamson County's experience regarding growth pressures?
Thank you very much, and I'm happy to be here in Wilson County. So I was on the advisory committee, so a lot of things resonated with me because I was there. The thing that really struck me was how clear almost everyone was about this change. There was, from an economic perspective, there was no question, and that's something everyone cares about. But really, community character was the thing that seemed to matter the most to people. Keeping farms, but recognizing that people need places to live and growth is inevitable. Where do we put it? It seemed so sensible to me, and I think Mike's leadership was helpful. Mary Anderson was also very clear about where he stood on it and was able to communicate that. But I just think the clarity and the near unanimity really struck me.
First, just let me say it's so good to be here. I see a lot of friends in the room. First time doing anything like this. I told Tom Brashear, I'm like, okay, I'm way out of my element here, but I'm happy to be here. I've learned a lot in the last month. Really impressed with GNRC and their planning process. They're leading our county through, so I'm glad they're here. And I was just really impressed with Mike and what he had to share. What Williamson did, that was impressive. And to end up at the end of that couple of years of planning to have 92% agreement, that's pretty cool. So, yeah, I'm sure GNRC will help us to get to 92% agreement here in a couple of years. So, so several things. I loved how Mike said that they started by identifying the character and values of the community. That's a really good starting place. And then they set about to set in place ordinances that would protect and enhance that character and those values. That just makes sense, doesn't it? So I liked how they came up with ideas to take that rural land and turn it into income-producing things like wineries. Lots of things you can do with open spaces besides farming. So I thought that was a great creative idea. And I really liked the idea that Mike shared about dense cities with large open spaces in between. You know, when I go to Franklin, it's like, you know what? I think Mount Juliet and Lebanon and Watertown, all of us would benefit from having a vibrant downtown square with lots of green spaces, lots of restaurants like downtown Franklin. So, so Mike, good job. I was really encouraged to hear what you guys did and look forward to our enjoying similar results.
Good evening. It's good to see so many people here talking about this. I was struck by what a good model it was for y'all to use here in Wilson County. That they laid it out for you. They've already done it. They've already figured out what works. Mike could probably go into a lot more detail about, you know, what meetings were the most helpful, what meetings didn't end up getting any closer to the 92% agreement. And I think it's a great model that a lot of communities around Nashville can follow to figure out how to get on the same page, how to figure it out. And then the stick-to-itiveness of the plan, I think that is really important, that the cities all agreed. They said this wasn't just the Williamson County, it was the Williamson County plus all the cities agreed to this plan, and we said we're going to stick to it, and we're committed to it. And, you know, they still had their input. They still had the changes to the urban growth boundaries that they could propose. And the commitment to doing it every 5 years. It's a hard thing to keep coming back to, but as fast as Middle Tennessee is growing right now, y'all are going to have to do this every 5 years for sure.
Okay. Question number 2, and Mike, you are included in this. Thank you. From your perspective, what will be the most significant challenge that growth brings to the county? Liz.
Well, I can speak to the pressure that farmers have. You know, you have this life-changing opportunity to sell your land for development, but that's not what you want to do in your heart. And some people do want to do it, and it's their right to do it. And in Tennessee, unfortunately, we don't have funding. So what we do is we work with individual landowners to limit development on their land, and it's through a conservation easement. That's what it's called, like an easement, any kind of easement, and it's perpetual. And there can be a tax deduction, federal tax deduction associated with that. In some places, that rather than a tax deduction, they will actually, some states, they will pay you to protect your land, and we don't have that here. And so that's a barrier for people who care about their land and would like to see it remain farmland. So I think that's a significant challenge that we have across Tennessee, but especially in the counties around Nashville. And in other parts, you know, you think of Rutherford County, you think of around Clarksville, the threat of development, and I say that not that development is bad, but that kind of leapfrog development that can happen that then clogs our roads, and infrastructure can't get there, and all of those things are challenges. But I really see, I talk to landowners all the time who have to make that hard choice, or a group of four heirs have to make a decision, and 3 want one thing and 1 wants another. It's really, I think of it from the human perspective. It's a really challenging thing to face the kind of pressure.
Yeah, thank you, Liz. The growth is inevitable. The question I think that we're asking is, what kind of growth do we want in our community? The question, what are the significant challenges? The challenge to me, the threat, is all the growth. It turns us against each other here in our community, that we begin fighting each other, that we let fear and greed divide our community. Fear over what you're going to build next door, greed over how much money can I get for my land or with whatever I put on my land. We all need to be working for and looking for, thinking about what's the common good, what really benefits our entire community. If the businesses and the farmers are fighting each other, if the developers and the government are fighting each other, you know who wins? XYZ Land Company out of Chicago, because they have high-priced lawyers who can come in, they'll find the loopholes in the zoning ordinances and put things in our land. If we don't get united, all they're concerned about is not the good of our community. They want to turn a profit for their stockholders this quarter. We've got to get unified as a community and say, this is the kind of community we want to build. We've got such a great opportunity here to develop a strategy. What do we want our county to look like in 25 years? So this is an exciting opportunity that we can make this a great place for our grandkids to live. But we've got to get together, get unified, not fight each other. The enemy is not in the room. The enemy is those who would want to come in and try to turn our land just into dollar signs rather than a great place for our kids to live.
Going back to the sticking to it, a quick story for you. I spend a lot of my time right now working in West Tennessee. Blue Oval City is something you've probably heard. It's the Ford plant that's going in outside of Stanton, Tennessee. Stanton's tiny. It has about 300 people. They're planning to employ almost 6,000 people at that Ford truck plant and battery plant. So communities like Stanton and Brownsville and Haywood County that are near there are going to experience growth that they have not seen. Most of those counties around there have not grown in the last 50 years. So they are going to see growth for the first time. So Haywood County spent over a year, thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars developing a land use plan, and the county passed the plan. Everybody was on board with the plan. There were lots of these types of meetings. And then in one of their cities, a developer came along and they said, I want to propose a mixed-use development that is going to have residential and retail, and their pictures were gorgeous. It was going to be a beautiful development. The houses were going to be great. The retail was going to be really nice for them to have. But it was outside of the residential development in their land use plan. And it was literally weeks after they had passed the land use plan. And it was before the planning commission in one of their communities. And they had to decide, are we committed to this land use plan that we just developed? What can we do to maybe move them back into the area where we propose the development to be? What are we going to do? Is this all going to go to waste, all this time that we've spent, all this money that we've spent developing this? Or are we going to say, this is our plan, we committed to it, we voted on it, we love this plan, we're proud of this plan, and we're going to keep it? And so it's to be determined. They haven't decided exactly what they're going to do yet, but I think that could be something that would be difficult for your community.
Thank you. I don't have a lot to add after those three really good answers. I will say that, you know, if any county that is even reasonably close to Nashville is experiencing and will continue to experience tremendous growth pressure, and so it all comes down to finding ways to accommodate additional growth while still maintaining and preserving what makes us special in the first place, and not to lose that. Growth, at least a certain amount of growth, it can be good and can be healthy for communities. I think growth to a degree is inevitable, but the kind of growth projections that we see don't have to be inevitable. Those projections are made through a combination of looking at existing policies related to development, looking at available land, looking at constraints and that sort of thing, And so communities do have the ability to chart their own path.
Okay, thank you all. Brooksy, this is directed to you. As the county grows and brings economic development, what strategies do you think could help attract businesses and create jobs while preserving the rural character that residents value? Where in Tennessee has this been successful?
John just said it and Mike just said it, that the growth is going to happen. Y'all are a beautiful community. Downtown Lebanon is one of my favorite downtowns in all of the state. We actually stole your Main Street director so she could come replicate what she's done in downtown Lebanon all across the state. So people want to be here. People are going to move here. And y'all just have to figure out where you want them to go and, you know, how you're going to make it work for your community and to preserve that rural character. One of the programs that our office offers is called the Select Tennessee program. So we have Select Tennessee does a couple of things. One, it certifies industrial sites. So we go out to industrial sites all over the state and we look at the ones that are best prepared to recruit industry. They already have water and sewer. They're already graded, they're flat or close to being flat, or they can get the water and sewer in a reasonable amount of time. And we put our stamp on it, our Select Tennessee stamp on it, and we say these are the best industrial sites in the state of Tennessee. So somebody can go to our department's website, pull that up, see, okay, I need 200 acres, I need 50 acres. They can see where those sites are, and they can know that they're making a decision that is based on good information. We also have a grant program to better those sites. So maybe sewer isn't quite there, it needs a couple hundred more yards. We can help you get sewer there. We can help you grade it. We can help you do a nice sign for it, something like that. And then we also have a program called the Property Evaluation Program, where we realize that some communities don't know what good industrial sites are. So we will bring a consultant in and we will say, here are 8 pieces of property we found. You know, some of these are people that are interested in this becoming industrial property, and we need somebody to tell us what's good. And so our consultant will come in, a consultant that does this every day for their job. They will come in and they will look at a site and they say, this is your great site. This is the site you need to work on. This is the site you need to develop. This is what this site can be for your community. These are the sites you need to just forget about. They should stay farmland. We do not want to touch those. Or this is a site that maybe in 5 years or 10 years or 20 years will be your best industrial site if you do these things to make sure it happens. So we talk all the time. The industrial site development programs from our department are not going out and looking for farmland and saying, we could put a factory here, this would be great. We're coming with a very thoughtful look at this is where it makes sense. This is where they already have water and sewer, or the water and sewer would be close. This is where the transportation network can support an industrial plant. This is where the workforce to support it is, and where we can grow that. And it's just a very thoughtful process. And y'all have participated in some of those programs, and I encourage y'all to continue participating in those. We tell the Department of Ag all the time, we're not trying to steal farmland. We don't want farmland. We know that farmland is important to Tennessee, but there are places where industrial development can happen and can do really well. And I think there are a lot of examples out there that we can show you about. You know, maybe it's developing a brownfield site, that it's a site where there was a building there and the factory left 10 years ago and nobody's come in and cleaned it up. Maybe that's your best site. Maybe the empty building is still great. And if you go in there and give it a paint job and replace the copper wiring that somebody stole, that's your best site. And we can provide guidance on that and do it in a way that educates your community, educates your commissions about that, and make sure that the development is where y'all want it to be and what y'all want it to be.
Thank you, Brooksy. All right, John, this one is directed to you. We've heard that housing affordability is a challenge for some in the county. How are you seeing that play out into our community?
Yeah, there might be 1 or 2 people struggling with housing costs. No, almost all of us are, aren't we? I mean, you might even say, well, no, I'm not. I'm okay. You know, we've got our house mostly paid off. We're homeowners. But here's the question. If you had to buy your house again right now, could you? Could you afford to buy that same property? That's a little bit concerning. Amy and I, we'd love to downsize, and we can make great profits selling our house, but what will we buy? So it's a real challenge for all of us, whether you're a homeowner or at any economic level. Two of our daughters have bought houses in Tennessee in the last year. Both have good incomes, and both of them had to get really creative to figure out ways to get in houses that they could afford. I mean, how are our kids going to buy houses in it when the real estate market is so expensive? That's a real concern. How can they even afford to rent? And that's where it really gets concerning. That's where Compassionate Hands works, the people who fall out of the rental market. You know, if your rent goes up but your salary doesn't, what are you going to do? If you're a parent, maybe you could go get a second job, but typically those second jobs don't pay that well, and then you have to pay for child care, and you end up worse off sometimes. Or if you're a senior, disabled, living on a fixed income, and the landlord raises your rent. I mean, we had a guy last winter. He was homeless because he was a senior on fixed income. Rent went up. He was on the streets. Or what if you get hurt at work? We've had someone that called Compassionate Hands in the last month. They got hurt at work, and workers' comp, this will be such a surprise, workers' comp was slow to pay. Insurance, can you imagine that? Insurance was slow to pay, and they lost their apartment because they couldn't pay rent, waiting around on insurance to come through. Or you just fall behind on your rent. It gets really tough if you fall behind. We had a family that came into Compassionate Hands this summer, and they had gotten behind on their rent, and the landlord asked them to leave, and so they did. They were not evicted. But what happened was then they went and applied for other apartments. Of course, you have to pay a $50 non-refundable fee every time you apply for an apartment. So apply for apartments. What they heard from the landlords was, well, we called your old landlord. He said you weren't that good of a tenant, so you're going to have to pay 3 months' rent plus a deposit to get in. So here to get into a $1,200 a month apartment, they're having to put down $6,000. Who can do that? So folks say, well, what about public housing? Well, that's definitely the cheapest around, but public housing, there's a waiting list. We found that for our people that are homeless here in Wilson County, it takes at least a year for them to get into public housing if they can qualify. Section 8, vouchers are hard to get. Most landlords don't want to take Section 8 vouchers because they can make more money on the open market and don't have to deal with all the regulations from HUD. I mean, it's really tough if you're at the bottom end of the economy. I think we would all be alarmed to know how many people are living paycheck to paycheck, just barely above the poverty line. And we get in a pinch and we're in that spot. They have no reserves. You hate to ask a friend, hate to ask a family member, may not have a family member you can ask. There's a lot of people right there teetering on the edge of disaster who are renting properties all over our communities. So we might say, man, that's a shame. I'm glad it's not me. As though it has no impact on the rest of us, but it does. Because wouldn't you like to keep your workforce? Like, don't you like it when you go to the restaurant and there's people to serve? You go to the retail places, there's people to wait on you? Don't you like it when you go to the doctor, there's somebody to draw your blood? Somebody to take care of your kids in daycare, somebody to be the ed assistant in your kids' class, somebody to work in the lunchrooms at your school's cafeteria, somebody to change your oil, fix your washing machine, mow your lawn, clean your church. You know, at our recycling convenience centers around the county, they're hiring right now. $16 an hour, no benefits. That's actually pretty good for the low-end labor market, but how are you going to afford housing on that? So it affects all of us. It matters what happens to our low-income workers. They're a vital part of our daily lives, even if they don't vote, even if they don't show up for community meetings like this, even if they're dealing with addiction or mental illness. Everyone needs a roof over their head. We really don't want a bunch of people sleeping on the streets of Wilson County. I mean, with Compassionate Hands, we're trying to help people get off the streets and into housing, and it's tough. And there's a lot of good people and a lot of good nonprofits working on solutions. We need more solutions. I'm hopeful that this planning process will keep housing costs on the table in the discussion. I'm so glad that it's on the table right now. So let's keep thinking about this as we move forward over these next 2 years and develop a plan so that everyone can find a place to call home.
Okay, Liz, this is your question. Our community values the natural environment and open space in the county, and Wilson County has some spectacular farmland and natural features. What are a few considerations for preservation and conservation of land in the reality of a high-growth, urbanizing county? What do you have to say?
Well, that's what we do at the Land Trust for Tennessee. We help communities work on that community character, that rural character, through the preservation, the permanent preservation, conservation of land. And we do that. We don't conserve everything that comes along because sometimes that's not the right thing for the land. If it's a small parcel, we don't do it usually. Sometimes we do. But if landowners would like to work with the Land Trust for Tennessee or learn more, just give us a call. And, you know, think about Leaper's Fork. If you've ever been out to Leaper's Fork, that all around that community is conserved with conservation easements. And so that sweet village that's there has land that's conserved by the Land Trust all around it, by the Land Trust and willing landowners. We don't go to people and say, you need to do this. This is a voluntary process, and it takes a couple years usually, or a year, to work with us. But we're here to serve your community and to help preserve that community character. That I love Wilson County. We have conserved just under 1,000 acres here. In Williamson County, we've conserved almost 8,000. So that's a big difference. Across the state, we've conserved 136,000 acres in 25 years. And that's without some of the financial incentives that other states bring to the table. So I would also say that in this process that you're going through as a county, considering really what are the places that define the character of Wilson County? What are the special places that people love? I saw some things out there, and really look at those areas and consider what Williamson County did, which was actually downzoned from 1 house per 1 acre to 1 house per 5 acres to conserve that community character. The other thing, something coming out of the Williamson County Comprehensive Land Use Plan update, was to do an open space plan for Williamson County. We did one for Davidson County in 2011. Things have changed a little bit since then. But out of that came some really great conservation of public land. And so looking at where there are park deserts, where are the places in Wilson County that need to remain rural, and then potentially putting some funding behind doing that. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Liz. At this time, we're ready to wrap up the panel. I have one more question for all of you, and this does include you too, Mike. What keeps you optimistic about managing growth in a way that balances community and economic needs and providing a high quality of life?
Well, everyone who's here makes me optimistic. The panel, but all of you who are here who care about Wilson County, care about your community, and then in all the other meetings, all the people who came. I was really impressed by the number of people who are engaged here in Wilson County. So thank you for being a part of the conversation and for caring about your home county. I'm encouraged by the number of people over the last few years, really since the pandemic, who have stepped forward. We're seeing the pace of conservation really increase in Tennessee, an interest in it. I think people really understand why the natural world is important in a different way. It was a refuge during the pandemic, and I think it brought a lot of people to care more about the open spaces in their community, and I hope that's the truth here in Wilson County. I think it is. You all have so many beautiful, little town centers. Lebanon is truly one of my favorite towns in, downtown centers in Tennessee. And I'm optimistic that if you have that and then you're able to conserve land around in the rural communities, you're going to be able to keep that community character. And we're here to help. I do have some information if anybody wants it. We did a statewide conservation plan, and I have some of those. We did that in 2019. So if anybody's interested in any of that, I have cards as well. But thank you all for being here. This is really exciting to see so many people so engaged.
Thank you, Liz. I'm glad to hear about your work. I want one of those. So, Melanie, you asked what keeps me optimistic about our land use growth. I can't say that I'm optimistic because there's an awful lot of agendas and there's an awful lot of money to be made by a lot of people. So I'm hopeful, though. I'm hopeful that we can make a good choice and move into a good future. And here's what gives me hope. It's kind of an interesting story. It's my parents. They own 300 acres of farmland in Dalton, Georgia, for 40 years. In 2017, they were approached by a group of Civil War buffs, and they had gotten together with some hikers and some mountain bikers and Whitfield County government, and those groups came together and applied for federal historic land preservation dollars. They bought my family's farms and several adjoining properties. Today, you can go out and hike Rocky Face Ridge Park. It's 1,000 acres of farms that were bought by this group of citizens. It's a beautiful place. I always figured that my farm where I grew up would get plowed under to make a subdivision, or even worse, a carpet mill. That's all we have in Dalton. That made me sad. But what I'm so proud of with my parents is they took less money than if they had subdivided it. They took less money in order to leave something wonderful for future generations. So I guess what makes me hopeful is that there's good people in Wilson County that would do that too. That you take a little less money for your farm, for your property, in order to build something really wonderful for future generations. So maybe that could come out of this planning process over the next few years.
I agree that the best thing is seeing the crowd here tonight and the people who are invested. I think that there are lots of examples out there for you to look at. We talked about Williamson County. There are some bad examples that you can learn from, things that you don't want to do. And there's resources to help from departments like ours with our Select Tennessee programs. Tennessee Valley Authority has programs to help. USDA Rural Development, U.S. Farm Service. There are lots of organizations out there that can help y'all with either making the decision or implementing the plans once you have them in place that you can all learn from.
Thank you. So in Williamson County, I'm optimistic because I feel like we've got a good foundation in place with the comprehensive plan that the county has adopted. I also think that there's really good leadership among the different jurisdictions that are at this point aligned and pointed in the same direction. And then we've got an engaged citizenry that's going to hold those elected officials accountable for making sure that the outcome is what people want to see. Here with you all, I'll echo what everybody else has said, which is the fact that there's so many people here to talk about future land use is something to be optimistic about. I mean, people getting involved participating, engaged in the community is what will lead to a successful outcome. You've got good leadership here as well. Obviously, GNRC and the county and Tom's team have done a terrific job with outreach. So stay engaged, and you'll be able to control that level of optimism yourselves.
Thank you all.
All right, everybody. So we've got a few questions, and really round of applause for Melanie for leading us through the panel. Thank you so much. All right, so I'm sorry we are not going to be able to get to every question that was written down, but again, if you have any, please write them on an index card. Our staff will take them, and we'll make sure we respond. But Mike, you get the first one. Could you expand on how Williamson County maintained property values while decreasing density outside the urban growth boundary?
Wow, that's a tough one, and you know, I'm not a realtor and I'm not an economist, but you know, property values in the region have just been soaring. You know, I'm sure that's been the case in Wilson and every other county in the Nashville area. So that's part of it. I also think that there is an idea of rural character adding value to areas. If you look at in Williamson County, some of the areas with the highest per acre value are areas that are sparsely developed, and I think people like that and are willing to pay a premium for that a lot of times.
All right, and so this next one might be for Brooksy and Mike. What can we as rural residents do to help protect these farmers' lands? Go for it.
Well, you know, obviously, you know, attending meetings like this and being a part of a process that will result in some decisions being made, and hopefully those policy decisions will help preserve farmland and help make the situation better for farmers here in Wilson County. So I would say stay engaged in the process and make sure that your interests are represented in all these meetings.
Yeah, I agree. There's some zoning that y'all can put into place. There's some land use that you can put into place to make sure that you protect the areas that you want protected. We talked about it a lot, that growth is going to happen here, and so figuring out where that growth is going to go, where you are going to put those people so that you can lessen the pressure on the farms, because there is somewhere else for them to go where they can still experience the rural character that y'all love and that the people moving here want, that there are places where they can do that without having to buy up somebody's farm.
All right, well, I apologize, but that is the time that we have. We want to make sure we get you out on time. We'll go through some next steps of where you can engage some more in this process and give us your input. But first, please join me in thanking Mike, Brooksy, Dr. Grant, and Liz. And you're welcome to stay up or you can step down. All right, so again, my name is Jessica Hill. I'm the project manager for the Wilson County Master Land Use Plan update. Many of the boards y'all have participated in, and if you're leaving, I understand. Please make sure if you haven't given us your input, you do. We'll also have surveys online for you to participate and share with your friends that were not able to make it this evening. But again, we know this region is growing. Over 250,000 people in Wilson County is what we anticipate by 2045. That's a 74% growth rate between now and 2045. So that's pretty fast. A lot of new people coming to the county. It's 281 people per month moving here. It's 195 jobs created every month, and it's only 91 housing units. So that as Dr. Grant pointed out, there's that discrepancy in the amount of housing that are available for the number of people that are moving to this county, which is raising housing costs. So how do we ensure that the inevitability of change is leveraged as an opportunity to change, to improve quality of life? We know that change happens, but how can we harness that and make it positive for Wilson County? And that's through this planning process, similar to what Mike spoke about in Williamson County, being engaged, getting your voice heard, making sure that the plan represents the community's vision for the future, where you would like to see growth, and what that development looks like. So again, as Mayor Hutto mentioned earlier, we started back in April of 2022 with some community meetings to really understand what were your visions, what were you hopeful for, what were your concerns. And from that, we presented out in the hallway, and what we'll be talking through over the next month is the emerging themes. So what we heard over and over around the growth, managing the growth that's coming, understanding that we being resilient and sustainable around that growth, recognizing that there are infrastructure needs, there's some natural constraints, being cognizant of rural preservation and preserving that small town feel and character that comes to mind when you think of Wilson County, having a responsive government that responds to its residents and its stakeholders, and then investing in infrastructure, knowing that the roads network needs some improvement. I know some of the questions that we received are very specific around some of the county roads, so that's one of the key themes that is in the plan as we move forward. So what's next? How can you be involved? We are now shifting into a similar process that Mike talked about what Williamson County went through, which is scenario planning, understanding different ways that are options to grow. And so Wilson County, we also have what we call a business as usual. If you were to continue doing as you're doing right now with your policies in place, where we would anticipate the number of people that are moving here to go based on that policy allowances. So this is the opportunity during the planning process to say, what if we do something different? What if we decide to grow in a different way and change our policy to protect what's important to us? And so this is that opportunity to say, what if? We know there is no perfect scenario. This, again, is a model. It's a scenario. It's the best guess that a computer and people can do in reaction to some assumptions. And we know that there are always going to be trade-offs. We know that the things that we decide to do are going to impact different areas of things that are important to us around transportation, land being consumed, loss of farmland and open space, access to transit or access to parks. So these are the things that we will look at as we have different scenarios for you to consider. So in the next 2 weeks, we will be out back to 5 schools in the community. So we're adding Tucker's Crossroad that will be on November 5th or 12th, excuse me. You can sign up. We encourage you to sign up for a workshop at planwilson.org. So you can help us know how many folks are coming, but we really would love to see all of you out there. Please come to any of these. They're going to be the exact same in each of these locations. And the schools and the addresses and times are all available, but again, similar to this one, start time at 5:30. We'll also have a survey online very soon around the emerging themes and key takeaways. The poster board's outside, so if you didn't get a chance to participate tonight, know that it is available online. And if any of your friends, neighbors weren't able to come tonight, they can also do it online. And with that, because I know we want to get you out the door, and again, we really appreciate your time this evening and look forward to additional conversations I'm going to turn it over to Tom Brashear, the Development Services Director for Wilson County.
Good evening, and I truly want to thank you for coming out. I know some of you may not feel that this is terribly important to be involved in, but it is. Your input is definitely valued. We want to make sure that we've heard loud and clear from you, and to some extent we have heard loud and clear from certain parts of the county about what their priorities are in regards to preservation of farmland, sometimes economic development, things of that nature. I want to share a little bit of a personal story. The 2006 land use plan I was involved in adopting or getting it pushed through and adopted. And it focused quite a bit on infrastructure. Now, we have to talk about infrastructure in a relative environment because somebody's infrastructure might not be as good as someone else's infrastructure. And in Wilson County, we tried to direct growth to where we had the best infrastructure with the 2006 plan. We've had, I would say, mixed to positive success with that land use plan for the most part. It has resulted in additional density around which we could support existing communities such as the Glayville Crossroads area while trying to protect them from being absolutely overrun by the number of warehouses that are up and down 840. So it's done a few things to try to support with additional residential growth some retail commercial opportunities that might serve that community as an example. My hope is that with this land use plan, whatever development pattern that we end up working towards as directed by your input at the next 5 meetings, and I'll give you the times. The first one is Tuesday, November 12th from 5:30 to 7 at Tucker's Crossroads. The next one is Thursday, November 14th from 5:30 to 7 at West Elementary. The third one is Monday, November 18th from 5:30 to 7 p.m. at Carroll Oakland Elementary School. The fourth one is Tuesday, November 19th from 5:30 to 7 p.m. at Watertown Elementary. And the last one is Thursday, November 21st from 5:30 to 7 p.m. We're hoping, much like what Mike discussed in Williamson County, that there will be a overwhelming unanimity, if you will, in terms of the direction that we want our land use plan draft to be guided in terms of the overall development pattern. So please do plan to come. Please do plan to participate. And Wilson County is as important to me as it is to you. I grew up here. This was not mentioned tonight, so I'm going to take an opportunity to mention it. We all love our schools. And I'm a product of Wilson County Schools. My children are products of Wilson County Schools. And they've all been able to capitalize off of what the Wilson County Schools have offered all of us. And we certainly want to do things that support the school system. So I think that the current administration and the previous administrations have done a good job at that. I would like to thank my staff, Naomi Van Gelderen and Christopher Lawless. I don't know where he ran off to, Georgia Bain and Julie Hooper, in terms of helping undertake this monumental task. And with that, will close and just encourage you to please be involved. Thank you very much.